is international reserve holdings in EMEs, spillovers, motives, and exchange rate dynamics. So I hand over to Professor KJ Joseph, our director, for the further proceedings.
That you won't be able to, you won't be getting an opportunity to ask her any question regarding this thesis. You can ask other questions on the road and all, but if you have to help her, this is the last chance. And you also will not be getting any chance. But so I think as far as the supervisor is concerned, normally this is an occasion for supervisor to speak out my journey of first PhD thesis supervision. If at all you have supervised, if at all you are an experience, if at all you have taken the wrong routes and how I came. These are all learning because PhD is quintessentially not 200 pages writing. PhD is a part of your life. PhD is a period that you will remain in your life if you have internalized the problem. If you have internalized the problem. It should be a life experience. So, floor is yours. You can talk about your thesis, your journey, if at all anything to say. Otherwise, start with that. I know only my thesis. My thesis can be matter of fact, no problem. All your choice. But you won't get another opportunity. That's the only thing.
Good afternoon, all. Respected Director, distinguished members of Research Committee, and esteemed faculties of GIFT and other institute, and my dear friends. It's my privilege to present my pre-submission seminar on the doctoral thesis titled International Reserve Holdings in Emerging Market Economies, Spillovers, Motives, and Exchange Rate Dynamics. Before going into the presentation, I'll briefly give you an overview of the topic. In today's increasingly interconnected world, international reserves or the assets held by central banks became a most important policy tool in order to mitigate against balance of payment crisis and thereby ensuring the external stability. Thus, the emerging market economies following the frequent crisis episodes and volatile capital and trade flows started accumulating more and more reserves. Given the interconnected nature of the emerging market economies, a reserve holding behavior of one economy cannot be viewed as an isolated phenomenon. It can be influenced through spillover effects. And moreover, the reserves holdings are shaped by motives that are precautionary motive and mercantilist motive. And ultimately, the reserves can have macroeconomic implications in the economy known as the cost of reserve holding. So it is basically more evident in exchange rate stability. So this thesis explores international reserve holdings in emerging market economies through three vantage points: spillovers, motives, and exchange rate dynamics. Okay. So this is the outline of my presentation. I'll start with introduction where I'll state background and motivation of the study. Then I'll explain the context, that is emerging market economy context. Then I will briefly discuss the review existing studies on this area and highlighting the significance of the problem. I draw the objectives based on the existing literature and significance of the problem. And then I'll discuss the three core chapters based on the objectives titled as International Reserve Holdings and Spillovers, Motives of International Reserve Accumulation, and Exchange Rate Stability Implications, followed by major findings and conclusion and policy implications. Over the past few decades, notably since 1990s, achieving macroeconomic stability, that is nothing but ensuring predictable macroeconomic environment through efficient allocation decisions and sustained growth, became an increasingly important concern for policymakers. Macroeconomic stability comprises three interrelated dimensions. The first dimension is price stability, refers to ensuring stable price in the economy. Next one is the real stability, which is ensuring stable output and employment growth. And finally, the external stability refers to ensuring sustainable balance of payments. So of this, external stability has gained increasingly policy relevance in the context of globalization and growing international economic integration. So this aspect became crucial because it mitigates risk of balance of payment crisis and limits exchange rate volatility and thereby ensuring stable economic growth. The rapid process of globalization and collapse of Bretton Woods system in 1990s led to deeper economic integration of this economy. And this deeper economic integration was further amplified by cross-border trade and capital flows. The policymakers and existing studies has widely acknowledged the benefits of this global economic integration, saying that it has created opportunities for growth and development, but at the same time, it has increased economies' exposure to external vulnerabilities and global shocks. As a result, these economies have started experiencing frequent episodes of financial crisis, capital flow reversals, and ultimately challenging their external stability. So these challenges became more evident in emerging market economies. According to IMF, EMEs are the economies which display rapid level of economic growth compared to advanced economy, but they have the risk of volatility and uncertainties. So these crises became more evident in the emerging market economies because they were relatively more vulnerable to the fluctuations in global financial conditions. These are the major financial crisis episodes in emerging market economies, starting from India's BOP crisis. We all know in 1991 we had BOP crisis, and the recent crisis episodes includes Brazilian, Argentina, and Iran crisis. So following the repeated occurrence of financial crisis in emerging market economies, this economy has started searching for an effective protective strategy in order to protect their economy from external vulnerabilities. Several policy measures were adopted, including collateralized credit facilities, reduction of short-term debt, and finally, holding of international reserves. Among these, international reserves gained significant policy attention as a credible and flexible tool. As I mentioned earlier, international reserves refers to assets that are readily accessible and controlled by monetary authorities, that are central banks, to finance external payment imbalances. The major components of reserves include foreign exchange currencies, gold, special drawing rights, and reserve position at IMF. So if you go through this table, you can see that the components of international reserves in EMEs, foreign exchange currencies are the major component, constituting 84.47%, followed by gold. Thus, emerging market economies has started adopting holding international reserves as a flexible and credible tool because it provides insurance against crisis, facilitate market intervention, ensure liquidity, and thereby reduce the external instabilities. But given their increasing interconnectedness and structural vulnerabilities, these emerging market economies started accumulating more and more reserves against the external shocks. So in these economies, appropriate holdings of reserves began to determine sovereign ability to access global financial markets. Accordingly, emerging market economies accumulated reserve at an annual rate of $250 billion, which was equivalent to 3.5% of their GDP. So, given the interconnected nature of emerging market economies and deep-rooted structural asymmetries due to strong trade and financial interlinkages, we can say that reserve holding behavior in these economies are not isolated phenomenon, but it is an interdependent phenomenon. So reserve holding behavior in EMEs cannot be viewed as merely a domestic policy choice, but also response to global economic and interconnectedness. So if we go through the trend in international reserve holdings, this provides the comparative picture of reserve holdings in advanced economies and emerging market economies. Initially, it was advanced economy used to hold more reserves than emerging market economies. But if you go through 2008, that is the financial crisis period, you can see that emerging market economies are holding $4,000 billion, whereas the advanced economies are holding half of it, that is $2,000. And when you go through the share of emerging market economies and advanced economy in the total reserves, you can see that more than 50% of the reserves are held by emerging market economies, further says that these international reserves are becoming a very important policy instrument in these economies. And among the external assets also, international reserves are becoming a major component. So based on this, as I mentioned earlier, EMEs continue to accumulate large reserves despite opportunity cost. Opportunity cost in the sense that central bank hold these reserves in the low yielding as foreign assets, that is US treasury bonds and all, instead of using this for other productive investment purposes. So there will be opportunity cost while holding these reserves. And given the interconnected nature of EMEs needs further inquiry because these emerging market economies are interconnected mainly through trade and financial channel. This can increase their exposure to spillovers through multiple channels, and this needs further inquiry. And about the persistent reserve accumulation behavior of emerging market economies, the motives behind this reserve accumulation become unclear. And finally, the holding reserves can have implications in the economy, particularly for exchange rate stability that need more empirical investigation. So this raises important questions and concerns. Why emerging market economies are holding reserve buffers? Are reserve holdings behavior shaped by cross-border spillover effects? Do reserves always stabilize or destabilize exchange rates? Holding these questions, I would like to discuss a brief review of literature pertaining to these concerns. Starting from the theoretical consideration, the international reserve accumulation can be explained through post-Keynesian and structuralist theoretical perspective. When we mention about post-Keynesian perspective, they discuss about currency hierarchy and dollar hegemony, and thereby it caused financial instabilities in the economic system. So EMEs hold reserves as a protection against the external vulnerability. And complementary to this view, structuralist or core periphery perspective says that the core economies are advanced economy. They are basically shock transmitters, and the peripheral economies are emerging market economies. These economies are shock absorbers. So since they are structurally vulnerable to the advanced economy, they face persistent balance of payment vulnerabilities in their economies. So they hold reserve as a safety buffer against this crisis. So both the theoretical perspective use reserve accumulation as a strategic response to external vulnerability and asymmetries in the global economic system. Based on the theoretical consideration, the existed empirical literature has made a limited attempt to identify key drivers, motives, and macro implications of reserve holdings. So when we go through the key drivers of reserve holdings in emerging market economy, studies have examined macroeconomic determinants of international reserves and identified trade, capital flows, exchange rate, inflation as the major macroeconomic determinants in EMEs. However, limited attention is given to the interconnected spillover effects across EMEs because EMEs are interconnected through trade and financial channel, but they have largely ignored this fact and overlooked the dominant role of US in influencing the international reserves. And the reserves are held for a motive. Mainly, it is explained through precautionary and mercantilist motive. Precautionary motive is holding reserves against capital flow volatility. Mercantilist motive is holding reserves against the reserves for ensuring external competitiveness and export-led growth. So, but there is no clear consensus on the dominant motive behind the persistent reserve accumulation in emerging market economies, accounting, time varying, and spillover effects. And finally, when we go through the existing studies on macroeconomic implications and reserve holdings, existing studies have identified growth, inflation, exchange rate stabilities as the major macroeconomic implications in EMEs. And also, they suggest that exchange rate is the primary transmission channel and major macroeconomic outcome in EMEs. However, the empirical findings remain inconclusive, and they refer the macroeconomic implications based on the fixed reserve threshold level. So this also needs more empirical examination. So the existing studies do not exclusively analyze questions of are reserve holdings in emerging market economies are shaped by cross-country spillovers, whether reserve accumulation is backed by any motive considering time-varying nature and spillover effects, and how the exchange rate stability in these economies are influenced by the level of reserve holdings. This gives rise to an important question. Why do emerging market economies continue to accumulate large international reserves? And how are these holdings influenced by spillovers, motives, and exchange rate dynamics? Based on this, we have drawn three major objectives for this thesis. The first objective is to examine whether cross-border spillovers influence international reserve holdings in EMEs along with major other drivers. Secondly, to analyze the underlying motives behind reserve accumulation in EMEs and to capture their time-varying effects. Thirdly, to assess the implications of international reserve holdings on exchange rate volatility and identify their critical threshold levels. Yes, so the so here I'm arguing that in the international economic system, the countries are interlinked through trade and financial channels. So the spillover effect means an event occurring in a country can transmit to other countries through many channels, mainly through trade and financial channel. So in case of reserves also, we cannot look the reserve holding behavior in EMEs from an in an independent manner, rather than it is influenced by trade and financial channel through the spillover effects. That is what I am arguing here.
Example of the subject. Can anyone explain? But somebody else should explain that. But what is this cross-country spillover? A typical example. Example of a typical cross-country spillover. Can someone explain that? Any one of you? Can someone explain what is an illustrative case of? Can you explain anyone? Otherwise, you can't think. If you want to think for her, you should know that concept. You have to explain that.
So, for example,
can you just take an example?
For example, if we take the episodes of global financial crisis, so that event occurred in one country that has transmitted its effects to the it has affected the economies almost all over the world. That is basically the spillover effect. So this effect comes through any of the channels. That can be trade channel or financial channel, capital flow channel. That is the concept behind the spillover effects and this cross-border transmission.
Okay, go ahead.
The first objective basically evaluates the key drivers of international reserves in emerging market economies from a spillover perspective. So this chapter is titled as International Reserves in EMEs, Drivers, Channels and Spillover. As I mentioned earlier, over the last two decades, emerging market economies has emerged as the major drivers of the global economy due to their rapid growth. So this was further amplified by the rapid expansion in trade and financial linkages. This has deepened the global economic integration and interconnectedness among emerging market economies. However, this greater interconnectedness also led to transmission of external shocks, contagion effects, and external vulnerabilities across economies. Consequently, a change in global economic conditions, particularly in US, that is taken as a major advanced economy, can strongly influence the macroeconomic fundamentals and reserve holding behavior of emerging market economies. According to Pesserin and others, they point out that this increased globalization and the interconnectedness has important consequence for financial and monetary policy of central bank, where they should, when they frame the monetary and financial policies, they should consider this cross-border spillover effects and interlinkages. Therefore, accounting this interdependency has become essential in the integrated global financial system. Because we argue that the reserve holding behavior is not an isolated phenomenon. It can be affected by domestic, that is endogenous, and other foreign external factors. So the more economic interdependency necessitate proper modeling, since there are trade and financial channel together which international transmission of shows can take place. So the existing studies have attempted to identify the key drivers of the international reserves, Most of them are country specific. And Eisenman and Marion 2002 has studied the key drivers of international research in the context of emerging market economies. And they found that foreign exchange volatility and trade openness matter, but they didn't mention about the global spillover effects and linkages. And almost all the studies do not account this spillover effects and global interlinkages. And also they overlook the significance of US policy decisions. So this is a critical gap in the literature. This needs more empirical investigation. And in 1998, Cohen also discussed the currency hierarchical structure, that is differential position of currencies in the international monetary system. We know that dollar is the key currency. It is also acting as a major reserve currency due to the safe haven nature. So when you go through this graph, you can see that the dollar is the major reserve currencies in emerging market economies, marked by the light green color. And given the hegemonic characteristics of US dollar and central position in international monetary system, we argue that any policy decisions in US can influence macroeconomic fundamentals in emerging market economies. So this linkage is also very important when we consider the determinants of international reserves. So for accounting these interlinkages, we have used Jiva dataset developed by these and others. It is a quarterly macroeconomic variable dataset, and we have also used international financial statistics and stock market price indices. So the sample period is from 1996 Q1 to 2023. So we are taking quarterly data in order to better capture the spillover effects. And since our context is emerging market economies, we have taken EMEs based on IMF Emerging Market Economy Index. It has 20 emerging market economies, but we have dropped 7 due to data availability issue. And as I mentioned, these emerging market economies are interlinked through trade and financial channels mainly. So to capture the trade channel, we have constructed trade weights using bilateral trade statistic. And for financial channel, we have used the coordinated portfolio investment survey where they give bilateral investment flows. And these are the variables that I have taken. So international reserve is the variable of interest, and other variables we have taken GDP, inflation, exchange rate, equity price, and interest rate. Finally, we have taken oil prices as the global control variables. Since our interest is to capture this spillover effects and interlinkages, we have used Bayesian global war model proposed by Felkircher and Huber to identify the determinants and cross-country spillovers of international reserves. So the advantage of the Bayesian framework is it incorporates in shrinkage priors to reduce overfitting, address the cause of dimensionality, and account the stochastic volatility. So compared to other spillover methodology, this effectively captures the cross-country spillover effects. So in the Bijiva model, so we use pre-specified weights that are introduced to account the bilateral linkages between economies. So we are using trade weights as well as financial weights. So they should satisfy the following conditions. So the external variable or foreign variables are constructed using this weight matrices. So the star variables are the foreign variable. So the Bijiva model can be written like xit is equal to that equation. And we argue that international reserves are determined by internal, that is domestic factors, as well as the external factor that are given by the star variables. What is? That is the internal factors, domestic factors. We are weighting the foreign factors based on the weight matrices.
These domestic factors.
X is domestic factors. Okay, so that is like we are giving weights to the variables that we have considered. For example, we are taking exchange rate. We assign trade weights and financial weights in order to construct the foreign variables. So that will become foreign exchange variable. So if we are taking exchange rate of India. Okay, so for constructing the foreign variables, we use trade weights and financial weights. So with these weights, we construct. We have constructed using 4-year average from 2016 to 2019. We have used bilateral. It is the for average measure. Yeah, one. Mm. Yes.
With say China or Singapore, how is the trade weight computed?
So for if you are taking India, we have constructed trade weights based on it's bilateral trade with the other countries. Like if we are taking we are taking 13 emerging market economies and US. So we constructed the trade weights based on the bilateral trade.
So that's what I'm asking.
Export and import.
I'll tell you. I'll give you a scenario. I think that's how you would have done it. For example, you take the total exports of India to all the 13 countries. So you have 13 countries, including India, right? So 12 countries. So then you take the relative share of each country's export
Yes.
to rest of the
Total.
trading partners,
Yes.
and you do the same for
All countries.
so and then you do the same for all countries
I think it
bilaterally.
should be trade. Trade is a sum of export and import. First of all, if you have emerging market economies as a cohort, you are taking from the global economy. Suppose there are 20 people. Within that 20 people, in a particular year, what is the total export among them and total import among them? That is the total trade in that.
That is
cohort.
within the emerging markets.
That is what she's already doing that.
Yes.
It's bilateral.
No, I understood
The
that.
bilateral comes with then.
No.
Then you should be talking about that particular bilateral among them. Then you take the share in that, not just the export alone.
So suppose out of India's export basket, what proportion of the export gets accounted by the EMIs, other 12 EMIs you have taken?
For each country, we have.
No. Question is, out of the India's export basket, let's say in a given quarter, that is so India trades with the rest of the world. Imagine India is trading with the rest of the world. Now the rest of the world can be broken into groups or countries.
Okay.
Correct? So now you have two categories. One is India's trade with EMS, which is the subtraction of total world trade minus the EMIs. So what proportion of that contributes to? So what proportion of the world trade is accounted by EMIs alone? Understood?
Okay.
I was just asking that question.
So here we have taken, for example, in the case of India, we have constructed the bilateral weights for all other EMEs with reference to India. So that will capture there will be trade weight metrics.
No, I know. See, that's what I'm trying to ask. So can you tell what is the share of EMIs in total export basket of India? EMIs that you have taken, not the whole EMIs that the IMF identifies.
Okay.
Understood? So is it like what proportion of it does it get accounted? These are the trade weights, na?
Yes.
Okay. So now I'll tell you. So apart in India's export basket itself, you take India's total export basket, then take the share of US. How much does the US constitute?
Like for India.
That is the largest trading partner, right?
Yes.
As far as exports is concerned for India. Then the largest trading partner for import is China, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So now I'm saying that, so you have the total exports of which what proportion of it is getting accounted by the EMIs. And you have taken that value and then constructed the matrices. So how is that constructed? What is the total sum? How did you derive the total sum?
It is the total sum of all exports and imports of India. Like
no, that is what I'm asking. So that should not be done. Then the relative weights will not add up to 100.
We are like normalize the metrics.
Even then it will not add up to hundreds. Intuitively, it will not add up to 100. You should not take total exports, na? If you are interested in bilateral trade, okay, and computing the weights for bilateral trade, then you should take the sum of the trade that you are taking about trading partners and then do the relative weights. The relative weights come as shares.
You have done your group of emerging market economies, which you consider as a group. That total is your 100. Am I right?
Mm.
That is it. If you add that share, that will be 100.
No, she is saying total trade.
Total trade.
Total trade will enter
No. Okay, because
within that group, right?
Within that group,
So that's what I'm saying. Is it within that group?
yes, within the all EMEs,
Whatever this 13 EMs, that is within that group.
Group,
It's not that global.
global level.
No, it's within that group.
within that.
We take global, it won't.
Yes.
My question is, how did you compute this particular XI, X star IT? So you have the trade weights and investment weights, right? Now, if I understand that weights are designed. Okay.
Mm.
So now you are multiplying this weight. Here, what is J? J is the channel.
J is the like number of the
Countries. I
countries.
is the channel then.
I,
So you have
Is the-
WIJ, right?
yes.
So what does I stand for?
For that time period.
No.
No, not time.
See, there is JT. T stands for time.
Time. Mm.
So WI, I should either stand for the channel weight. No. If you are trying to multiply with the
At-
weights
Mm.
of the channels, then I should be the channel.
Okay. I is the trade channel.
Channel.
It can be trade and financial or financial channel.
Even then, you see, you are only summing up for J equals 1 to N. So how is I getting into the equation there? I didn't understand. That's what I'm asking. So you look at the equation itself. You have I, you have J, then you have X into T. Sorry, J into T, right? So how is the summation happening? That's what I'm trying to understand. And so you are multiplying these weights. Let's take the summation is happening correctly only. You're multiplying the weight, let's say, of trade channel with each of the X variables that you have. Is it that you're doing?
That X variable is what? Suppose I never have.
So you have to write equation slightly different. Sorry.
This portfolio investment are you taking here?
Yes, bilateral.
FDI,
SBI.
FDI or portfolio investment are you taking?
Yes, for
Take it.
financial channel.
You are taking finance.
Mm.
So you get what will be that portfolio investment, how do you take it here? You have data on
Yes.
India's portfolio investment in another and
Mm.
another your corresponding
Yes.
country wise.
Yes,
you have
yes.
that. Okay, go ahead. I think you come back to that.
Is X a composite variable?
Composite.
It's weighted average variable.
X star IT is the weighted average that I can understand by the formula itself. But what is X? Is it X one variable or a composite variable?
It's a one way variable.
So what is that one variable?
For example, if you are taking exchange rate,
Uh-huh.
if we want to know the foreign counterpart of that exchange rate, we have to construct using trade and or financial weights. So that is what expressed here. So in the standard
Can I
BGML
then
methodology.
understand? Forget about that. Can I then understand that? So even for the exchange rate, you will have two X star IJTs. Is it like that?
Yes, for trade channel and for financial channel.
With respect to exchange rate. So X is just the exchange rate, none of the other variables.
Yeah. Yes. For the I was giving an example.
And that's what I want to
Uh.
know. Like how many variables will be computed like that?
We have exchange rate, inflation rate, interest rate. Then we have reserves also.
So for each, you are computing two variables.
Yes. That is the foreign counterparts of those variables. Because we are interested to know whether international reserves are determined by domestic variables as well as the foreign variables. So this is the standard procedure followed in BGWAR methodology. Otherwise, we can't compute the spillover effects.
So for each country, you have your standard total regression equation.
Country J.
Sorry,
Yes,
each
countries.
country J, you have your standard vector auto regression for each. I mean, like we write, but the thing is that you add these two, what is it, counterparts. So that is so X, and then you should explain.
Yes. So in the
Just 1 minute. So that means you will, can you go back? So you are adding how many variables and lag of those many variables, right?
Hmm.
So if you have, let's say, 4 domestic variables,
Yes,
4 into 2 and
lag
4
of
into
that.
2 of that many variables you're adding.
Yes, that's what we are not using GVAR. The advantage of BGVAR is to reduce that over parameterization.
Try to understand the
So
economics
then there
behind
is
it.
one more
Somehow-
thing. So you
somehow
where you
that's
have
not
to be,
coming through, that's what I'm asking. In research, you need to know the underlying economic process that takes place. So what is the, when you are talking about the spillover effect, the inter-country spillover within what is called your emerging market economies, you just take one illustration, because that's what I was asking. Can you illustrate? What is this cross-country spillover you are talking about? That please try to internalize it, and then essentially you can speak this particular summation into the economics of that. There is behind this, there is an economics. That economics is not coming out. So you should be communicating in economics language, but mathematics can be a language to convey the economics. That is what is missing. I think you should continue.
one
I
more
think you should not-
clarification
you should
from
not-
you, sir. What is I here in XIT in the last equation?
I is the like for the countries. T is the time period. It's actually a panel kind of equation.
That's what, see, then you have to be consistent with the notations. There on the right hand side, you're using J for representing country,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you are writing it as function of XIT. So there's inconsistency in the way you are describing your subscript, right?
Okay, okay. I'll look
Correct.
into it.
And you are specifying a panel model here, but you're not estimating a panel model.
Stacked model. First, we'll estimate country
I
specific.
will, no, I'm asking that for the specific question. The moment you are estimating panel this kind of specification,
Hmm.
what I would assume is that there will be a lambda I in the system. If you are writing a model like this, but that's not what you're actually estimating. You got the point?
Yeah, but this is the standard terminology in this literature.
Yes.
How they write.
Right? Standard terminology meaning, see, you are basically writing a panel specification. The moment you are writing a panel specification, country specific effects are there in the other term. Then you should write it differently. Why should you write someone else's specification?
This is the BGVAR method specification.
No, you can simply write. I mean, I am saying that I will write like this. I will write XT, right? Then I'll just say that I'm running this for I number of countries. So specification doesn't change. That is an accurate specification than this, right? I mean, you're basically creating a confusion by writing a panel model and estimating a time series regression. Okay. Okay, continue.
Okay, so here we have one of the advantages of the BGVAR model is we used stochastic search variable selection prior to reduce the model uncertainty. So our interest is to know whether the whether international reserves are influenced by internal or external factors. So for that we got posterior inclusion of probability, which indicate relative importance and significance of domestic and foreign variables in the model. So it is based on the SSVS prior. And okay, coming to the results and discussion part. So the model stability results of BGVA model estimated using Markov chain Monte Carlo framework. So the model says that both in trade and financial channels, these are stable. And we will be using SSVS prior specification and posterior inclusion of probabilities to know which variable are significant in explaining the international reserves in each emerging market economies. So PIP, we will be considering PIP values greater than or equal to 0.5 following the standard literature on median probability model. So this is the posterior inclusion of probability in trade channel. So if we take India, you can see that The GDP is significant, that is more than 0.5, and its on reserves lag is also significant, and exchange rate is significant in domestic variables. But in case of foreign variables, the equity, exchange rate, and interest rates are the major determinants of India's reserves. Similarly, we can observe
Can you
another
first one? What are the four variables you said? What are the variables? Repeat.
GDP
GDP.
reserves.
Yeah, resource. What does it mean? What GDP, what does it mean? GDP is coming out significant in your, what does it mean?
So when we take the trade channel, so GDP growth significantly affecting the international reserve accumulation of India's international reserve holdings of India. So GDP, of course, economic size matters for reserve holdings in an emerging market economy like India. China also
What is the
exhibiting
period of
the 1996 to 2023.
So that your GDP growth or GDP size, what you have you
GDP.
taken size or growth you are taking?
Size.
This is size affects the size affects the level, both are all on level. This level of
In-
GDP affects your level of reserve.
Mm.
Okay, go ahead. Next.
Okay. So this is the results in
This is the
trade channel.
Trade channel.
Niveditha, when you are
Okay.
interpreting this, don't say GDP effects, because you have to say in 12 or 10 out of 12 countries, GDP is significant.
Mm.
And then you are giving a specific interpretation rather than giving an average effect. If you are saying GDP is positive and significant,
Not
is
everything.
GDP positive significant in all the countries? No, right?
No.
So it is better to mention specifically in
Mm.
8 out of 10
No,
countries
this is
GDP.
also a problem. It has got time sensitivity. This is your period of finance is not 1 year. When you are talking about in period does matter. Then it's an average effect you are talking about. That's, I mean, this looks very, how much it can say, because we are talking about 20 years. The 20 years time, there are global economic crisis on the one hand, these are the things, how many internal crises, and how will you say about what, I mean, what, how much you can, how can someone take it seriously? What are you talking about?
So our interest is to know how the like external variables are affecting the international reserve behavior of a country. So that is what we are doing here. Basically capturing the spillovers in through trade and financial channel, which is very important in case of an emerging market economy like India. So that is what we are doing.
Point
here.
is when somebody who deals, somebody who knows economics, when they listen it, what you take about the last, you are 25 years, 20 years, 25 years. What is the period you are talking about?
20, it is quarterly data. So 25
25
roughly.
years. Go ahead, I think. I'm not able to, I'm not able to comprehend that in terms of, you know, what is the GDP does matter in terms of your reserve. And quarterly data you analyze, and to say that you don't have to do all these things, I don't know. Then what is the driving it?
What is the relative role of foreign external factors compared to the domestic factors?
Then the explanation should be like that. This explanation should be like that.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay.
You should spend time in terms of what the fact of the case is that suppose you go out, when you go somewhere out and presenting it, there will be all kinds of questions coming in. People ask. You should be able to digest it and communicate in a more effective and convincing manner. But because not these are all your friends here. Not you will not be talking all the time to your friends. So there will be people who does matter, who really want to know about what does it mean. You should be able to communicate effectively to them. Econometricians may be fine, but econometricians, they know only the coefficients, that's not significant, that's fine. But then you want to take the digested output and outcome out of it. What is that? Each variable, okay. In our, how many out of so many countries your GDP is coming significant? That's what does it mean? Think it over. Then And that itself can be taken as a graph. You can actually take that, this can be the input. From there, you can picturize your presentation and write better thing in terms of. Otherwise, so many variables goes out of the head. Go ahead.
So the results indicates that both trade and financial channels are important in determining spillovers across emerging market economies, although the effects are heterogeneous across economies. Among the channels, trade channel emerges as an important determinant of reserve holdings, and the foreign exchange rate variables and foreign equity prices emerge as the major external determinants, providing strong evidence for exchange rate spillovers and asset price spillovers. So the importance of exchange rate variables in both trade and financial channel highlights central role of it in the currency market dynamics. And further, our analysis extended into know how much of the forecast error variance, that is, how much the international reserves is explained by for domestic variables and foreign variables over a period of time. So basically, we would try to explore the importance of domestic and external factors in determining international reserves, both in short and long horizons. So this is the graph for the EME's FEVD in trade channel. As you can see, in the initial period, the own shocks are explaining the international reserves in trade channel. If you take India, you can see that in the initial level, the reserves are explained through the own variables, but over a period of time, this is explained by the foreign variables. But in case of US, that is the bottom figure, shows that the reserves are mainly explained through the their own variables rather than affected by the foreign variables. And similar picture can be seen in the financial channel as well. This is also applicable to the US, where you can see that this is not being significant. The foreign variables are not
Each
being
countries, or what is that? Each
Each-
country?
yes.
Is it country?
yes.
So you will be finding countries which are closer to America, US, even within the what is that first and last? What is the first country?
Argentina.
Argentina is behaving more or less similar to America.
Yes. So their reserves are not at all affected by the own variables, are not affected by the foreign variables over the long run.
Argentina is a country which has undergone terrible time.
Yes.
Long run should still just
Yeah.
go back to trade.
No, there will be people seeing it who knows these countries concerned in a more closed manner, and you should be able to convincingly argue a result to them. America is more or less like Argentina.
But in trade channel, it is becoming the
Exposed.
exploring.
Financial channel, not that.
Okay, yeah, but you should expect these questions. You should read more about these countries. You should know about, because you are going to speak about the country. You should know about it. You should be able to explain why this is so. You should be able to say why. Somebody asks you why Argentina and US behave similar. How we explain that? Something like that. Useful. Because
But US behaves similar in trade as well as in financial channel. But Argentina is behaving differently in trade channel.
trade, they are behaving similar. That similarity.
In financial channel,
explain.
they are behaving
But
similar.
Niveditha, that is a bit counterintuitive because Argentina had gone through the
Yeah,
capital
yeah,
crisis.
no.
Crisis, now.
Actually,
So that
through the
means,
trade channel,
Whichever
more
channel.
than the financial channel.
how can you say that?
Because when the crisis occurs, maybe the
That was
Argentina.
basically
Hello,
Latin
flight
American
of
crisis, not
capital
trade.
was what was the
Yes, of
cause
course,
of
there
crisis
was an
because the IMF changed the rules. Immediately overnight, all their investments have flown back. You
It's
cannot
not
call
trade.
that trade channel, no? If you study Latin American crisis during that time,
Mexico.
what was the source of crisis? All the foreign
That-
investments have
Yes,
flown
yes.
back
Yes.
within very short span of time. No, it's not the trade. It's basically the investment. Right? But I'm saying then Argentina is presenting a very not interesting, counterintuitive.
I think cross-country studies are very impressive, but then you should be very careful. in terms of when you are talking that graph, you should have something to say, why I say, why these results are like this. Let's spend time.
അവിടെ പെൻഡല്ലിരിക്കണ മനുഷ്യൻ അവരെ ചെയർമാൻ
May I know who is on the line? May I know who is on the line?
So finally, going to the analysis of how US policy decisions are affecting the emerging market countries' reserve holding behavior. So the US is considered as the dominant economy influencing emerging market economies through global trade and financial linkages. So here we have taken impulse response function based on Cholsky decomposition. Shocks are introduced to major US macroeconomic variables, including interest rate, international reserves, equity prices, and oil price. So this shows how expansionary monetary policy, that is negative shock in interest rate, affects the emerging market countries' reserve holding behavior through trade channel. And in this case, if the credible intervals do not include the red line, we can say it is a statistically significant response. So when there is an expansionary monetary policy in United States, it is significantly affecting China, India, Malaysia, South Africa, and Thailand, given their strong trade linkages between US. And the similar okay, so in trade channel, when the interest rate is reduced in United States, that is the expansionary monetary policy. When interest rate reduces, it will increase the investment or the growth in this US economy. Thereby, it will increase the global demand for the products. Not global demand, it's demand on the products from other countries. So through trade channel, this is the. So when interest rate. Yes. So the interest rate will. Yes. So the investment. It will rise their investment and output. Yes.
As a result, how other countries trade is getting affected?
Because when there is an economic growth in US, they have their capacity to import goods will increase, no? Because now they have greater capacity to. So that's why.
You're saying that there is a growth. If you need to hire imports,
Yes.
how?
Because now they can demand more products. Since they are having higher growth, the demand for imports will also rise now. So that will, given the trade interlinkages, it will rise the exports of emerging market economies. So when the exports increases, foreign exchange earnings also increases.
Net effect you should see.
Yes.
When FedEx changes the rates, its impact cannot be considered only in terms of. It cannot be confined only in terms of the how does it affect the output market. That also has its implications on how US market is for the capital investment. So basically, this is a net effect. It is going to come. It's not that immediately
No,
there will be
it's
a lot
not
of
a
demand
direct
for.
impact.
Yeah.
But we
But
are
I
trying
was
to
actually worrying. Only thing is that we are concerned about the emerging market economies as a group. That's what. Not. I don't know how the US now coming in, because earlier your estimation was that sigma and all is estimated a cohort of emerging market economies. You are trying to study among themselves. That's what I was thinking.
We are interested in US because it's an advanced economy, and
That is.
most of the year.
So among them, what is the insight? Among them, whether it's because spillover among themselves.
That spillovers also have US also. We have taken US also.
Okay, US came only in the empirics, not in the theory. When you said it, you're right.
Yes.
So when in the model, how US is included? Because in your model, when you sigma it, the J is country one, US is also included there? Only emerging market economies or including US?
Including US.
That is not.
Because our context is emerging market economies, we are not showing the US. We have the results for US also, since, yeah, I will include it. Yes, yes. I have the results of US also. Mm. Yes, included US.
Yeah, you should say that. That it is somewhat, we said, we were arguing about as a subset of the global trade as this.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Finish it off.
So these are the summary of IRF responses in trade channel, and I'm not going into the each IRF and all. So this is for the summary of IRF response in the financial channel. So both of this shows that even though there is country-wise heterogeneities persisting there, the US is significantly impacting the reserve holding behavior through trade channel or a financial channel. So the second objective,
I just want to do one question just to reflect, because if you put everything, I don't think that we'll be able to ask about. But whether it makes any sense in terms of the mean behavior, the average figure of these countries for a quarter a century, does it mean anything? What is the usefulness of that kind of a variable? I'm asking. Just somebody, a policymaker is thinking it. What will be their use? Think it over.
so
You-
when
You should have an answer of somebody asking you that. Please remember, think about it. Somebody can ask the question. You are taking the model is ultimately coming with a variable for the last 25 years. This is what is coming. So instead of that, since your quarterly figures, okay, how does it vary across the different the periods? These particular 25 year is heterogeneous not only with respect to one country. One country, if you take for India, this 25 year has been very different. And among countries, there is difference. So then if you are taking any kind of generalization for the whole period for one country, and again, countries with heterogeneity, what will be that kind of aggregate some mean figure will convey? Instead of that, if you can have situation wherein periods of global economic boom, globals of period characterizing the development, will that be better? I don't know. But anyway, you be ready with the answer to that. Just think about it.
That
You will
comes-
you will be able to find an answer for that.
That-
It will have importance.
That will come in the other two objectives.
But I'm saying even this
Yeah.
estimation when we do, somebody is asking a question, you should be able to answer that. Think about it. Think.
I
take
have
home.
the answer for your question.
You have the answer.
So the type of specification, she's running a time series model. We can't break the entire T into components.
I'm not concerned
So-
about your techniques. I am concerned about the real. So, for example, trade minister sitting here, he is telling me that for the last 25 years, this average varies. So what? It doesn't mean anything. If somebody asks me, then you should have answered for that. Don't talk in terms of language that people will not ask. All those who design those equations, all those who design the equations have strong economics. From the base of that, they derive that. And you are taking only that without knowing that journey. ആ ഗവേഷകന്റെ ജേണി നിങ്ങൾ പഠിക്കണം. അയാൾ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇത് എത്തിയെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കണം. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഈ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടതാണ്. Take home these questions and reflect, not for, because you should be ready with answers. Think about it. And the people, your friends are here to ask questions, because I don't want her to ask any questions which is strange outside. If you are sitting here, you should learn. You should learn from her. And here, don't waste your time and sleep here. And you are here to help her. Okay. In this classroom, anybody is asking her question is her friend. If anybody keeping quiet, let her go. And this is the only chance you will get her, because if I don't want her to get a question outside which is never asked here. That is the purpose. And it is our thesis. Our study is going out of the institute. We all own it. We all have to own it. That is the point. Okay, go to the next chapter. Quickly finish.
So the next chapter focus on the underlying motives of international reserve accumulation in emerging market economies. So I would like to start the discussion by stating Keynes' classical formulation of motives of holding money. We know that transactionary, precautionary, and speculative motive that explain behavior of individual economic agents. Like that, nations also accumulate money. More specifically, central banks hold international reserves for different reasons. So the EME's positions at the periphery accumulate reserves not more for efficiency but for the sovereignty to preserve the policy autonomy. So the reserve holdings in emerging market economies is done through two major motives, that is precautionary motive and mercantilist motive. So in the precautionary motive, it says that the emerging market economies hold reserves as a buffer against the sudden stops or reversals in capital flows. And the mercantilist motive associated with reserve accumulation with maintaining competitiveness and promoting export-led growth. So these motivations of reserve accumulation has evolved over time given the global economic conditions and reflecting the policy priorities and external vulnerabilities. And here also we also tried to capture the whether US has any impact on shaping the reserve motives. We have made an attempt to capture this global spillover effects as well. But our main interest is to capture whether this motive have time varying effect, whether these are static over a period of time or dynamic. So these are the major studies on motives of reserve accumulation. Most of them are country specific. Only one study has taken in the context of emerging market economies. That is by Deloitte and Fogg. So they have established that exchange rate undervaluation influence reserve accumulation. That is mercantilist motives prevails in the emerging market economies. But they didn't for a period of time from 1997 to 2010, but they have not considered the time varying motives in this area because the global economic environment is dynamics. So the limited analysis on the dynamic nature of the motives and the interconnected nature of the global spillovers are studies answers the following questions. Given the evolving nature of global financial environment, are the motives of reserve accumulation static, dynamic in nature? And to what do these motives coexist and are they mutually exclusive? To what extent these motives are reserve accumulation are influenced by global spillovers? So for this, we have taken quarterly data from 2000 to 2023, and we are interested in knowing two major motives, that is mercantilist and precautionary motive. For capturing the mercantilist motive, we have taken real effective exchange rate, and for capturing precautionary motive, it is basically a capital flow motive. So we have taken volatility of foreign portfolio investment. So we are more interested to knowing the time varying nature of the motives for reserve accumulation across crisis and non-crisis periods. So for that, we will be using an advanced econometric methodology that is known as wavelet coherence analysis. In the wavelet coherence analysis, we will get the relationship between reserves and motive variables both in time and frequency horizons. So the coherence level is marked by that coherence graph. So one means there is strong level of coherence, that is there is an evidence for the motive, and the blue color shows there is no evidence for the motive. And for here also we have used impulse response analysis to capture the global spillover effects. And coming to the wavelet coherence results, this is for the
An excellent point in terms of precautionary mechanism. And from there, you made a very excellent point. It will be varying across time. That is time varying. Equally important. As time varying, it changes. It also varies in respect of the changing character structure of the economy. Economy also will be changing. No? Time will be varying. Think it all. Only time varying effect is important. Equally important is that economies, China's time varying, it has changed. But along with that, for India it has changed, China it has changed, time varying. But what China, that variable that will be contingent on how, for example, China has also become very different, globally more powerful. They have become, market power has increased. So another country with other structural characters remaining same. That also think it over. Some only time varying is enough. That's the only question. Your these two, starting from these two argumentation, precautionary motive and mercantilist motive, and that is time varying. That cannot be considered as remaining same. It will be varying. That will be time varying motives. So, do you think that only time alone is enough? I think somebody can ask. Just go ahead. Go ahead with your time varying.
So time varying motives should be explained through changes in the economy. No, that is how it is usually explained. You are saying so it is time varying. Now, why it is time varying? Because the economic factors, or so there are economic factors, economic change that is happening. There are changes in the global policies. So all of them could actually
You are
change.
exposed. You are seeing it. You are seeing an observed thing exposed.
Yes,
Exposed.
that's how we
So they
establish.
will that it will capture you.
There is nothing called in time varying per se. Time varying, it is argued because it could be changes in the economy, it could be changes in the international policy landscape, or it could be shocks like crisis. So all of them
time captures everything.
all of them could be explored.
Time captures everything.
If we don't put it, these changes cannot be tracked. So what you get is just the average effect.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so these are the results for mercantilist motive. So we expect the strong coherence between the motive variables. So for mercantilist motive, we have taken real effective exchange rate and reserves, the association between real effective exchange rate and reserves. So if you see Argentina, you can see that the red area is marked by the strong coherence for the period 2002 to 2008. And 2008 to 2014, if you look, it is more or less precautionary motive prevailing in Argentina. And after that, 2014 to 20, it has mercantilist motive. So similar behavior can be observed in Chile, Indonesia, Brazil. And Malaysia, Thailand, and Turkey. And when we go to the precautionary motive, you can see that in most of the economies are exhibiting the evidence for precautionary motive. Some of them are, for example, India has precautionary motive during the time of 2002 to 2008 and 2014. And but in the mercantilist case, we see like not strong evidence for the mercantilist motive. So in India, it is precautionary motive that driving the international reserve holdings. But in most of the EMEs, precautionary motive is becoming evident. In Turkey as well, the precautionary motive is now also it is highly evident. So the analysis of spillover and reserve motives also reveals that the US has US has impact on shaping the reserve motives of emerging market economies. But in precautionary motive, they they have only immediate impact. But for the mercantilist motive, they have persistent impact. So all these results suggest that the precautionary motive is the dominant, persistent driver of reserve accumulation in majority of emerging market economies. In contrast, we use wavelet coherence because we want to know the motives, like prevalence of motive to what extent, at what frequency and all. So it reveals that mercantilist motive is more or less episodic and evident in the short run. But for the long period, the precautionary motive is more persistent, and the spillover analysis further reveals that US origin shocks have immediate impact on precautionary motive and long impact on the mercantilist motive. So all this suggests that the reserve accumulation behavior in emerging market economies are time varying, and there is an evidence for the evidence for the motives that are varying according to the changing situations of each economy. But the results suggest that the precautionary motive is the dominant motive because after the as I mentioned earlier, the emerging market economies has experienced frequent episodes of the crisis in their economy. So they started accumulating motives mainly to protect their economies from capital flow reversals and all. So the precautionary motive is the major motive that has come. So based on this,
How did you measure precautionary motive and mercantilist motive? This is what you're going to say?
Yes, sir. For mercantilist motive, we have taken real effective exchange rate. That is the trade weighted exchange rate. So in the standard literature of mercantilist motive, they have taken real effective exchange rate. For the precautionary motive, we have taken a proxy for capital flow volatility, basically FPI volatility we have taken. So if there is a strong association between these two. Yes, I have. So I discussed about the key drivers of international research from a spillover perspective, the underlying motives of reserve accumulation in emerging market economies. Finally, in this chapter, we try to discuss international reserves and its implications on exchange rate volatility. Why we have taken exchange rate volatility out of all implications, I'll explain. So the substantial body of literature has examined rapid accumulation of international reserves and associated macroeconomic implications. So the existing study shows that international reserve accumulation has most important implications on macroeconomic variables such as growth, inflation, and exchange rate fluctuations. But the studies further suggest that exchange rate is the primary the most important macroeconomic outcome, so that international reserves has a direct impact on this outcome. So this is the period. So this graph shows the exchange rate volatility in emerging market economies. You can see that there are significant spikes across the economies over the period of time. It says that emerging market economies, they have moved from fixed exchange rate system to flexible exchange rate system. And there is, but also even though they are accumulating reserves in order to stabilize the exchange rate, they are experiencing exchange rate volatility episodes there. So this unpredictability in exchange rate movements can further that can hinder the long-term development of the economy, challenging the external stability. So emerging market economies seen international reserves as the backbone of exchange rate stabilization, and they have accumulated reserves outpacing the traditional benchmark that proposed by the IMF. So the IMF has proposed a traditional benchmark for the reserve adequacy, and we have rule of thumb for the knowing the reserve adequacy and all. But emerging market economies have passed this reserve adequacy threshold, and they have started accumulating more and more reserves. So instead of ensuring the exchange rate stability in the economy, we can see some the evidence for the exchange rate volatilities. So the existing studies suggest that reserve accumulation may exhibit diminishing stabilizing returns beyond a certain point and can affect the external stability. So this leads to the questions of what are the macroeconomic benefits and costs of reserve accumulation, particularly with respect to exchange rate volatility? Do international reserves stabilize or destabilize exchange rate volatility in emerging market economies? And does the impact of reserves weaken or reverse beyond a critical threshold level? If there exists a critical threshold level, is it static or dynamic? That is it constant or time varying in EMBs? So for this, we have taken data from US Fed, European Central Bank, IMF, and Jiva data set also we have taken. Sample period is 2000 to 2023 Q3. EMEs have transitioned toward more flexible exchange rate regime in here. So we are our interest is to know whether the reserves to GDP ratio, that is the threshold variable, has time varying effect on exchange rate volatility or not. And for this, we are using a time varying state dependent threshold model. It's an extension of Hansen regression king model. Given the evolving changes of changes in the macroeconomic conditions of EMEs, we, ex- we ex- this methodology captures the nonlinear effects, that is kink effects, and it explicitly account to what level the exchange rate volatility is affected by reserves to GDP ratio, and if the reserves to GDP ratio is more than the estimated threshold level, whether it is changing or is it static or dynamic in nature. So the regression king model in the state dependent model can be specified as this. Beta 1 is the below threshold, beta 2 is the above threshold, and we have certain control variables also taken here. So the threshold variable is basically the reserves to GDP ratio, and exchange rate volatility is the outcome variable. And the null hypothesis of linear model against the time varying threshold model is tested using the following F statistic. Coming to the results part, we have estimated based on the time varying threshold model for 1000 bootstrap replications. From this, it's evident that the significance of the variables are constructed using confidence intervals based on 1000 bootstrap replications. And if you take the country by analysis, you can see that Argentina, the below threshold level is significant and negative. That means that when the reserves to GDP ratio is below the threshold, it will stabilize the exchange rate volatility because the coefficient is negative. But in case of India, you can see that above threshold is significant. That is, when the reserves are above the threshold, it will destabilize the exchange rate. That is, it will increase the exchange rate volatility in the economy rather than stabilizing the economy. And South Africa and Philippines exhibits the evidence for the constant threshold estimates. Based on this, we categorize the emerging market economies into buffer builders, late stabilizers, regime-dependent stabilizers, and post-precautionary builders. So the buffer builders are Argentina, Brazil, Indonesia. They show strong volatility-reducing effects when they cross the when it is below the threshold because of intensified foreign exchange intervention in these markets. And India and Peru shows reserves coincide with exchange rate volatility when it crosses above the threshold. Late stabilizers are Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines. These are crisis hit economies after Asian financial crisis. So they started accumulating more and more reserves, and they have only stabilization effect when they cross the threshold. So these graphs shows the time varying thresholds in emerging market economies. You can see the blue line, it is the actual reserves to GDP ratio, and the red lines are the estimated threshold ratio. So if you take the case of India, initially the actual threshold level was below the estimated threshold level because our reserves were not adequate in the initial period. But after the global financial crisis and all, we started accumulating more and more reserves. So now the reserves, actual reserves is more than the estimated reserves. Now in 2021-22 time, this has been converged. And now the estimated threshold is little bit above the actual reserves to GDP ratio. So these are the evidence. This shows the evidence for Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico, Peru, and all. So in case of South Africa and Philippines, there is no evidence for the time varying threshold, but rather it is a constant threshold. For them also, after 2005, these economies moved to more flexible exchange rate system. They're showing actual reserves to GDP ratio has crossed the estimated threshold rate. So these are the time varying threshold range for each economy, and you can see the below threshold as well as above threshold, but it is time varying. So most of the economies are showing evidence for the time varying impacts, and South Africa and Philippines shows the constant estimated thresholds. So the width of the threshold range differently considerably across countries, reflecting sensitivity to external shocks. So the stabilizing role of reserve is regime dependent and differs when holdings lie below above the threshold. Challenging more reserves is always better view. So coming to the overall findings and conclusion, the critical analysis on key drivers of international reserve holding and spillover effects reveals that there is an interconnected nature of economy play a crucial role in shaping international reserve behavior in EMEs. So it is not an independent phenomenon, rather than it is an interdependent phenomenon. Exchange rate is the major external determinant through both trade and financial channel. The shocks originating from US continue to exert substantial influence in the international research. And when coming to the time varying nature of the motives findings, in the precautionary motives are time varying and most dominant motives that explain persistent reserve accumulation here. And the mercantilist behavior appears episodic and country specific. The analysis on implication part reveals that reserves to GDP ratio, that is the reserve adequacy variable, shows that the emerging market economies are showing time varying embeds, highlighting the limitation that is IMF are using the static reserve adequacy benchmark. So instead of you referring to the static adequacy benchmark, we can go for time varying. We can account this time varying element while framing the reserve adequacy benchmark. So stabilizing exchange rate is regime dependent, operating differently when reserves fall below and exceed the estimated threshold. So coming to the policy implication part, reserve management strategies should be tailored to country-specific macroeconomic conditions rather than relying on one-size-fits-all, because IMF is following only one benchmark for the all emerging market economies. And the central bank should adopt a dynamic threshold-based framework for reserve adequacy assessment. In light of dominant precautionary motive and persistent global spillovers, this study proposes an establishment of emerging market contingent reserve management as a multilateral liquidity arrangement. And also, we try to suggest that EMEs should gradually diversify away from excessive dependence on US dollar they can diversify the reserve composition. And for example, BRICS has recently started initiative to alternate settlement mechanism. China has already started initiative to internationalize their currencies. So coming to the limitations, the study could not consider all EMEs listed in the indices because of the data availability issue. The future study can accommodate this. The study has not used any institutional variables and other variables to explaining the reserve accumulation behavior in EMEs. And further, for future research, one can use the country level data, its currency composition of forex reserves. So this study can effectively capture the how reserve currency diversification related to the exposure to core economy like US and other advanced economies. So the studies have taken international reserves excluding gold. For the future studies can also take international reserves including gold. And these are the publications in my read it, and these are the conferences that I have. Thank you.
Very well presented thesis, very well presented. I think the level of confidence that you have shown is very important, and it's very important, and it was really encouraging. And now the floor is open for questions, clarifications, comments. Anybody has any questions? I think especially welcome once again all those who have joined online. The floor is open for you, and we often consider those who consider online, those who join online are important people. So your questions are much valued than those who are present physically. If anyone would like to intervene in any form, you are most welcome. I was just wanting to ask you the real effective exchange rate you have taken for mechanistic motive.
Yes.
So when you're talking about a precautionary thing, real effective exchange rate is actually coming out of
The trade weighted
and
exchange rate.
real effective exchange rate is how it is estimated. What is real effective exchange rate? How it is estimated.
It's based on the trade
How it is
basket.
estimated, I'm saying, not based on. What is the real effective exchange rate? How it is estimated?
So it's based on the trade.
Please, you should
Trade.
know that. Okay, you should know the trade first. Okay, trade weight. No, it's not just trade weighted. It's not trade weighted. No. I should not be asking these questions here. You can ask your Gemini, it will tell you how it is done. But these are things we should be knowing because it should be sending a very wrong. Okay. So the precautionary motive also in that variable, they are interconnected. Your exchange rate and how real effective, think it over, think it over. And instead of that, if you take, say, for example, anything relating to share of GDP in terms of outward intensity of the economy, thinking of, it's okay. I don't want you to do that. I'm saying that thinking process, since it is it. So anyway, I think we have asked a lot of questions in between. I don't want to. You have any questions? Anybody? Students? Why you people are keeping quiet? You have been interacting with her. You should be knowing this topic better than us. Because we get to know of her only when she comes for some meeting. Otherwise, you know her every day. You are not friendly with her. Or you are all very narrow specialist. I'll tell you one thing. Once one other Ramachandran, former planning board chairman, he was talking about today's PhDs. Today's PhDs, not today's, at that times. You are all very different. He told, okay, somebody was asking, what are you doing working on? Sir, I am working on tube well irrigation. He told, hey, excellent topic. You know, the water table is going down, the tube well is proliferating is a problem. So what exactly you are working on? Then he told, I am working on, sir, 2-inch tube well irrigation. So I don't know anything other than 2-inch. So the world is becoming too narrow. You don't want to talk anything. You don't want to think anything. You don't want to hear anything other than your very narrow topic. That shouldn't be the case. Each one here should be having some idea about all these studies going on here. And you should have that. How do you know it? That happens only when you ask a question. Listen, 1.5 hours. I mean, now it is what? It's 1.5 hours she has been talking, I've been listening. So you should have some questions to ask her. It can be clarification, it can be a what question, why question, how question. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Niveditha. Very interesting and nice presentation. I have some clarificatory questions and some suggestions. You can take them. First thing, see, you have shown the composition of international reserves, relative share of EMAs and the advanced countries. As I told in the last presentation, you change it as a ratio of GDP. Because the later result actually shows that the level of GDP is a significant variable in reserve holding. That means the size does matter, right? So rather than taking the unadjusted variable, it's better to take that into consideration. These are things that I think you can address in the thesis. Since you are saying that your main contribution for the objective one is analyzing the spillovers, I think you should take a step back and then discuss more why you are interested in spillovers. Okay. And that has not, because you have passingly mentioned that the existing literature has not looked at spillovers. But why do spillovers matter than the direct effects? So spillovers, I don't see them as a direct effects, right? So direct trade effect versus the direct investment effect compared to an effect that is channeled through spillovers. And I think you have to make an explicit write-up in your thesis mentioning the significance of studying spillovers. If not, how existing literature would be missing a major component with respect to understanding the holdings of reserves. That is one comment. The other one is motives. Okay. See, you have used two indicators, but you have not actually justified. See, what is actually precautionary motive and what is mercantilist motive? What is that motive all about? And what is the intuition behind it? And how these two variables that you considered qualify for proxies? Maybe a discussion on how the existing studies have measured motives. What are the range of variables that are available in the literature? Over and above that, why you have picked this particular variable and justification for it. Otherwise, you are keeping us in dark, just mentioning that these are the two variables measuring two broad motives. Okay. And now coming to the motives results, very interesting results that you have. One is that, A, motives are time varying. Okay. And there's a cross-sectional variation in how countries have motivations, even if you keep the time varying component. Largely, some countries are precautionary, and largely some countries are and that proportion is low. Now, I think it would be nice to explain why some countries are following precautionary motives and why in some countries only motives are shifting, and what is the point of after which motives are shifting. And I think that discussion would really help and strengthen your argument. Then about the, Then about the US effect. I don't know, I think you somehow have some interest in the US. Now, can you explain, maybe in the thesis you could do it. You could think of writing why the US policies could change the motives across countries. And the change is not uniform across countries, right? Why is it that some countries are getting influenced by the US, because that's what you're interested in. And that discussion, otherwise you are leaving by saying that, okay, US policies does matter in terms of countries' motives. But the channel through which it could, if it is shifting towards precautionary, why is it happening? And if it is shifting towards mercantilist approach, why is it happening? I think that you could think of writing in the thesis. And the last part, it is on the last objective. As you know, I'll have some differences on that. But even if I keep my differences away, that is the only chapter I felt that you didn't spend much time on establishing the theory part of this relationship that you're testing, right? I think you should talk about what is the theory that is underlying, that talks about how reserves affects exchange rate. Is there a standard theoretical framework under which you can posit this problem and analyze it? Or is it just purely an empirical problem that you're looking at and trying to find the relationship? Okay. Then you are talking about threshold. You can maybe, for this exercise, as far as this exercise is concerned, you can definitely talk about it and say that above which the exchange rate volatility is stabilized and so on. But based on which, if you are making recommendations that, this is the excess reserves that the country should address, I don't think that thresholds could actually be used for it. I'll tell you why. Because when countries are holding thresholds, even if you look at how IMF is deciding what should be the level of reserves, it is not guided by the exchange rate principle alone, right? The IRs are not for just exchange rate stabilization. They have multiple, and your entire thesis, you're talking about trade channel, investment channel, and all of it. And ultimately, you boil down to say that exchange rate reserves threshold is conditional upon whether you are stabilizing exchange rate. Is a bit of a far-fetched argument, and that should not have any policy implications coming from there. As with respect to this country has a 5% additional IR, and that is because after this, the exchange rate is getting stabilized, so we are having additional risk. That I think is not a very wise thing to do. And so other thing is you are talking about below threshold and above threshold. Can you think of having an average effect to begin with, then introduce the threshold part. Because first you talk about whether international reserves as a percentage of GDP, whether that has an effect on threshold, sorry, exchange rate stability, and then introduce. That is how in the standard nonlinear equation, you first do the level effect and then you do the, here you have done the threshold, otherwise you just check the quadratic form or whatever you are interested in. And the last part is your policy implication, okay? There you have said that countries should diversify their currency. Rather than concentrating alone on the US. But you should connect it to why they should do it. You should connect it to your analysis. That suggestion should come from your analysis. And that is where I think all the shock analysis that you have done, unless you link it to your own findings, that particular suggestion is standing outside the thesis purview. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Your title and objective, title is very well done to capture your objective. Your objective and the title, that syncs very well. But as far as a logical thing, I'm just thinking, you find a phenomena all across the world that there is huge accumulation of foreign exchange. In fact, T.N. Srinivasan, as early as in mid-90s, he was saying that this money should be rather used for something, rather it's a waste. It's a waste. And now we have something like, even now it's 690, something like that is there. Now the first question is not spillovers, the motive. Why? The question is why? The motives, logically. I see it, why are they doing it? People are saying that this money, instead of keeping it, you can invest in, you can rather go for a high country which is highly deficient in infrastructure, you can use this money. But can they use it? Can they use it? Can they use it? Can they use it? Can these countries use this money for infrastructure? No. They can't use it because we don't know when the fellow will take it away. So this is not your money. What is the difference between the foreign exchange accumulation of China and India? What is the difference?
India is having 690.
What is the difference? What is the difference
3.3
between?
trillion.
What is the difference between the foreign? Both are having foreign exchange reserve. What is the difference between that? What is the difference between that?
China has 3.3
No, not
trillion.
amount. What is the channels through which, how it is made? How it is made?
Oh, how they are.
How it is made?
Oh, yeah, FDI.
What is the difference? What is the difference? The difference is that, I think you guys should know. What is the difference is that China's foreign exchange reserve is coming out of their X minus M. They export much more than what they import from India itself. How much they take away every year? That nobody will, once it is into their pocket, nobody will take it away. On the other hand, the money coming through FII, foreign institutional investors, that will go overnight. Overnight, it will go to another country if you are something is happening here. So the money which is in India is not, what is our trade is in deficit. Merchandise in deficit, we have barabar, we need to add foreign, your services, if you add, you have barabar a little bit of surplus, that's all. So actually the money which is accumulated is not our money, somebody else is keeping the money here. That is the difference. So the point I'm trying to, immediately when you are to want, these are the kind of things what we want to know. What are the force, what are the motives? What is the motives, why? What is the dynamics behind which it is coming? And that carries, then becomes, so I would say that motives, spillovers and exchange rate dynamics. But then the question is, why exchange rate dynamics? Why no other dynamics? That has not really come out from your thing. Think it over.
Yes.
Think it over. These are things that you may be able to, people may ask this kind of questions. Anyway, so if there is no other thing, I think it's time to celebrate. After all, everything is said and done. You have something. Okay, then you should ask.
not a question, just one comment. While doing research, in my opinion and experience, both the researcher and the audience feel free. That means things should be clear and more, we have to give more clarity at the end of our presentation. This is applicable to any research. But if we are creating confusions instead of clarity, then that needs so much revisit. So Einstein said, for example, one of the most complicated questions in the scientific world is how the universe is originated. So after so many theoretical understanding, after so many simulations, calculations, after explaining or interpreting so many mathematical questions, Einstein arrived at a simple equation that E is equal to m, energy is equal to mass, multiplied by the velocity of speed, okay, light. So this is a very simple explanation. So my observation in this presentation is, before the demonstrating the analytical framework, we need a conceptual framework too. So conceptual clarity is important in any research, because in this research only four concepts are involved. One is what? There is a international reserve
Research.
accumulation is there. Then we are examining it with motives. Then what? Exchange rate and spillover. So, but the right question is already stated by our director. Why countries hold reserves? That is the first question. Then, how this global and regional spillovers affect this accumulation? And then, naturally, next question will come: how reserve holdings interact with this what exchange rate dynamics? So, in order to get clarity for that, I am watching this presentation fully first time. And so you can make some assumptions. For example, reserve as a protective buffer to meet the external shocks. If it is the assumption, then a concept will come. We are expecting an external shock. Then a reserve accumulation needs is coming. Then there is an international reserve holdings is required. Then we need some exchange rate. So this kind of conceptual clarity and conceptual framework is there. That would be very good, that very useful in explaining your analytical part. If there is no conceptual clarity, then some issues may occur. That not only your research, in any research it is applicable.
Okay, thank you. Having said this, as far as we in the gift is concerned, it's a very important day. One of our scholars reaching the pre-submission stage. And it's not a small thing. Reaching a stage, everything said and done, it involves a lot of hard work, a lot of commitment, a lot of perseverance, a lot of systematic. I mean, you all, those who underwent that knows the pain involved in that. So I think you deserve a lot of appreciation for that. And having said this, the supervisor, I think he wanted to supervise by himself. He didn't want anybody else to do that. But I would say that this is could have been, I mean, I don't want to say that 2 eyes sees better than 1. This is my view, which you have all freedom, because I give a lot of freedom here. But I have a lot of experience of misusing freedom. I believe, and I urge all my colleagues, please remember, freedom, once it is given, if you don't use it, the person who has liberally given the freedom can take it back. So that is also, with respect, very important, because something which is given, it can always be taken back. It is given. Okay. So also I'd tell you that, this is a very important stage, and there are a lot of questions came. You should try to, because, and again, research is, don't think that this is an end of your research. It's a starting. It's a license to drive. The license, that's all. It's only a license. So you have to get to that license in the pre-submission and the other evaluate. I hope, we all hope and wish that your evaluator would be valuing your thesis very well, and you will be defending your thesis very well. We wish you all the best. And all the questions here are essentially, we think that these are the things somebody may ask. But I don't want, personally, I don't want any students to get a, oh, I never heard this question. No, this is a question. This is the question you take home and reflect. That's what, after listening here, these are the questions that we felt. That's all. So I think I appreciate and congratulate the supervisor. I congratulate the student and wish you all the best. So no chaya? Chaya ranjitla? Unda. Very good. Yeah.
The meeting. So thank you for being part of this pre-submission seminar. So hope to meet you soon. Thank you.